the challenge that we see is leadership sometimes confuses experience with resilience, right? Where they may have a younger, a younger individual or younger profile of employees, and it's like, well, they're just not working hard enough, or they don't have the grit that the older generation had, or whatever it may be, right? There's a whole laundry list of analogies that are out there. I think the opportunity is how do you really cultivate those few with tribal knowledge and start to build that into your system?
Good morning, folks. Welcome back to Agile Talks. I'm Sean Kane, and I'm joined by my colleague, my buddy, my fearless leader, Mr. Mark Beatty. How's it going, Mark?
Hey, good morning, Sean. How's it going?
Doing great. So today, Mark and I are tackling a costly problem that's hiding in plain sight: legacy processes and distribution. We're talking about slow quoting, manual searches, reactive service models that are literally leaving money on the table. So according to research, over 80% of distributors have lost deals due to manual processes, costing them an average of 5% of annual revenue. That's a significant gap between what customers expect and what distributors are actually delivering. So Mark and I are going to dig into this topic a little bit. So Mark, let's dig into where this disconnect is coming from.
Sounds great, Sean. There's a lot to unpack there. So I think let's focus on kind of the ones that are near and dear to my heart, the ones that I've seen kind of put up the biggest barriers or the biggest challenges for customers every day. The first one, and I think the one that everyone knows, is the manual search and the friction that creates, along with the repercussions of bad decisions. So when you think about the experience of going through search and the experience of a website, we all only have so much bandwidth. I think I recently just saw a report that people's attention span is down to 40 seconds now. So you think about the impression that you have to create within 40 seconds to make your website, to make the need of that search sticky. It's hard. So when you think about an engineer or salesperson making this journey of selecting the right components or the right sub-devices, there's a lot to unpack in a very complex situation already. So as they start to get frustrated, or as they miss the opportunities to cross-sell or upsell or find those substitutions, it just becomes a more and more drag on the experience. So what happens is they'll start to find alternatives. They'll go to a website that does have better search, or there are more breadcrumbs along the way to help them work through some of these challenges. I think the other thing that is missed a lot of time, there's big buzz right now about inventory, and everyone's concerned about their working capital and their financial performance. And a lot of these websites say, okay, something's out of stock, but they don't make recommendations of what is in stock. So there's all kinds of different angles that we can unpack that, but I think there's just an absolutely huge opportunity to even make small steps to reflect what's actually needed and improve this search.
Yeah, absolutely. No, great point. We talk about slow quoting, right? So, how slow are we talking? What is the customer's expectation when it comes to quoting, right?
Again, it's the challenge that we find is everyone's lives have just completely intersected, from personal life to how you want to do business. And if you think about our experiences using any big retailer, whether it's Amazon or Nike or Sephora, whatever it may be, that gratification is instant, right? You find your product, it hits your cart, the purchase is done within minutes. The challenge is when you step into our world, the sheer amount of choices, right? It's not 100 different types of perfume. It's hundreds of thousands of different types of perfume. And finding all the ones that make sense and kind of collaborate off one another and work together in the same system when you're talking about components is really hard. It's really hard. So I think the difference is when you talk about a quote from a personal use, it's instant, versus depending on the complexity of what the customer is actually looking for. I mean, you could be talking days, if not weeks, Sean. If the part is available or it's not been built for a long time, I mean, you could literally be talking weeks in some instances.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, that's just too long, right? When you're talking about a 40-second attention span too, waiting a week for a quote is just insane. Yeah, so let's talk about some solutions, right? So if a distributor wanted to fix this tomorrow, what have they done in the past, right? Versus what they need to look at now, right? What does talk about the past versus what they should be looking at from a future standpoint to resolve these challenges, right?
Yeah, I think the big thing starts with talent. You look across our industry, and there are a very select few of kind of like gatekeepers or real tribal knowledge experts that they just know how things work. They can kind of connect the dots. They know the processes. When they hit like a really weird situation, they know how to navigate it quickly. And I think the challenge that we see is leadership sometimes confuses experience with resilience, right? Where they may have a younger, a younger individual or younger profile of employees, and it's like, well, they're just not working hard enough, or they don't have the grit that the older generation had, or whatever it may be, right? There's a whole laundry list of analogies that are out there. I think the opportunity is how do you really cultivate those few with tribal knowledge and start to build that into your system, right? And I'm not just talking trainings. I'm talking about how you actually augment 30 years of experience into a year or two, right? And they're never going to be able to have kind of that experience, encyclopedia or that book of experience so quickly, but you can at least give them pathways to start enabling those choices faster and making better decisions quicker. So I think that how you replicate tribal knowledge, how do you replicate the champions, the true champions that enable your business to kind of function every day, that is a huge question mark for us and something that we're super curious to solve. And I would think most distributors, kind of have that one circled. I think the other side of it is, many times we focus on the top line. How do we get a lot more revenue? How do we drive revenue? How do we drive sales? These inefficiencies produce a lot of unseen drag, right? They are, kind of the small concessions that we make along the way that are death by 1,000, paper cuts versus just one stab to the heart type of thing. So we have this leakage from discounting product, from expedites, from line down charges, from all these things which don't seem like a big deal, but when they repeat every single day, every single week, every single month, those nickels and dimes become real dollars. And I think for a company to really take a step back and understand kind of, those exceptions really are bigger opportunities than what you see, is a huge opportunity, is an absolutely huge opportunity.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned sales, right? How about from a rep standpoint? One of the stats that I'm seeing in this world is that these guys and gals are spending only 28% of their time actually selling, right? And the rest is spent on admin work, right? So thinking about this, like, how does that translate to lost opportunities, right? What are these? How do these guys and gals, turn that around and start to actually spend their time on selling rather than, and stop losing opportunities rather than all this administrative type work, right?
You know better than anyone, Sean, being kind of a commercial leader, it starts and ends with the customer many, many times, right? So in most organizations, the sales force is the front line of that voice, of that connection. And for better or worse, depending on where that company is in their service model, in their journey of kind of customer satisfaction, it can vary, right? So if you're with a company that has a lot of quality issues and line downs and expedites, unfortunately, the sales team are the ones that typically shoulder that burden. I think some of it is, again, almost like what we were talking about with margin, is really understanding what keeps that team up at night and what are the barriers not allowing them to spend more time on the road. I would argue there are some companies that we've worked with that 20% is even that's a gracious number. In some cases, we're seeing 5 to 10% of the sales team actually driving, prospecting, new business. We've touched on this on a couple of our LinkedIn posts around pipeline generation. You really sit down and start getting into the health of your pipeline, and you ask a couple probing questions and the pipeline completely implodes. That doesn't, illustrate a lot of confidence in, are we touching the customer enough? Are we getting the products, the new products, the priority products out to who we need? Are we getting our fair share of new design and wallet share? So I think sometimes, these systems are optimized for internal comfort versus customer behavior. And that's the real big thing is, how are our customers, how are our markets, how are the industries acting, and what do we need to do to adopt to it?
Yeah, and obviously with generative AI, it's changing the game, right? I think that a lot of the the typical administrative work that we see in this world is gonna go away quickly with the adoption of Gen AI. But that's a topic for a different episode. So, no, Mark, really appreciate it. Thanks for breaking down the issue. The bottom line for our listeners is legacy processes aren't just inefficient; they're costing real revenue and driving customers to a competitor. So, the good news is the path forward is clear. So let's look to the future here. So thanks for tuning in to Agile Talks, and we'll catch you next time.
Appreciate it. Thank you.